Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to have a little discussion about when or if you should use the direct-to-grading service on COMC. Let's explore. So just a quick little thing about what this is. About maybe a year ago or so at this point, COMC opened up this service where you could submit cards directly to PSA or SGC or CGC, I believe. Maybe actually started with CGC and then eventually opened up to PSA and then to SGC. And so you could either send cards directly that are already on the platform. You could buy something on the platform and just send it straight off. Or you could send in batches, of cards. Like maybe you want to send in 100 cards just to your COMC account. Then you also want to send in another batch of 20 that you want to go direct to grading. There's occasions when this is a really good service, when I've used it and I've been very happy with the service, and there's occasions where I think this is probably you don't want to do this. Let's start with exploring what I think is maybe the one main time that you definitely don't want to use it, that I think a lot of people might be using it, and I would suggest to avoid this one. And that is if there is a card that you just buy on the platform, a modern card, ultra modern card, something relatively new, and then you just send it off to get grading based on what you can tell from that scan. I would not do this. The scan is not very reliable. I've had cards that I've tried this a few times. I've had cards that came back as low as a PSA 5 for something that looks really nice by the eye from the scan. From what I could tell, it looked really nice and it came back as a PSA 5. So clearly there was some major problems with that particular card. I couldn't tell though because I couldn't see it in person. Now they do have a $5 service that you can opt into where they will look at your card beforehand. I think it has to be a 2000 or newer card. They will say if they believe it will get a PSA 9 or higher, and then you can submit it off for grading. But that costs $5 per card, so I would only do that for much more valuable cards. And I've never found that service to be very reliable. I've actually had examples of cards that they suggested came back a PSA 8, and I've had other times where they said I shouldn't send it off, but I sent it off anyway, and it came back as a PSA 10. So I haven't had very good experience with that. Since it's $5, I'm not going to be using that service myself, unless they lower the cost or have some sales, and maybe I might consider. But for $5 and for something that they don't really give you any notes about why, and it's not really very reliable in my experience, I'm kind of staying away from that particular service for the time being. So anyway, I would probably avoid just buying a card there and sending it directly to grading. With the caveat being, that could be different for vintage cards. Vintage cards, sometimes even if it comes back as a SGC1, SGC2, it could be worth doing. For some of those, I have sent off a number of them, and that's the one occasion when I might do that. The other time I think I might not use COMC direct to grading is if you're not planning on selling that card on COMC later anyway. This should be a little bit obvious, but I could see people that might want to send in their cards, get it graded, and then send it back to themselves. Sometimes you use bulk submitters for this type of thing. I wouldn't do that if you're using COMC. I would only use it if you're going to go directly from after it's graded, you plan on selling it on the platform or putting it up for auction on eBay through COMC's platform. Now, the times when I think it's a good idea to do, there's several. The way I'm using it most commonly now, whenever I'm sending in a batch of cards to COMC, which I don't do that often, but maybe a couple times a year, I'll send a batch of a couple hundred cards into COMC. And since I'm already sending that batch in, I'll also, put to the side over that period of time some different cards that I might want to get graded. And then I will, if they're ones that I would want to grade and then sell on COMC, then I will go ahead and send them in the same package that I'm sending this other 100 or 200 cards that I want to be on my COMC store, but just in a separate small little box in the package that is its separate submission. Actually, I think this can be a better option than sending it to PSA or SGC directly for a couple of reasons. If you go through PSA itself, first, of course, you have to sign up for a membership, $99 a year membership. There's a lot of perks that make that $99 a year membership basically worth it. I think you get enough back, even in, I think you get some loop credit and some other things that actually potentially making a little bit of money on spending that $99 sort of, if you think about it that way. So it's not a big deal to sign up for that. But if you haven't signed up for that, then going ahead and sending it to COMC isn't a bad idea, because you're going to spend for the bulk submission for maybe about $20 per card to PSA. But if you go through COMC, you're going to spend $23, but it's COMC credit. So if you're already making money in COMC and oftentimes drawing that money out to be as cash in your own bank account, that $23 submission cost is in COMC credit. So really the way I'm thinking that, $2.30 of that, if I was to turn that into cash, would be taken by COMC anyway. So really it's $20.70 is the submission fee. But then there's also, because usually if you send in a graded card to COMC, you have to pay like $1, for the submission fee to bring it into COMC. If it goes through this, you avoid that dollar fee, so you're saving $1 there. So it's almost as if that grading fee now has gone from $20.70 down to $19.70. And you've also saved money on shipping both directions, because I was already shipping stuff to COMC, so I don't have to make a separate batch of cards and separately ship it off and spend that additional $15 or whatever I would want to do, including the insurance or whatever, that additional shipping cost, and then having it shipped back to me and stuff. That's additional cost per card. If you're only doing a batch of 20 cards, and usually when I'm sending in cards to get graded, it's not going to be any more than about 20 at a time. I just don't do that much grading. So I'm going to be spending quite a bit of money for the shipping. But if I'm already paying money to ship it into COMC, I'm not having to add additional shipping cost on top of it. And then because when it comes back to COMC, I'm not paying any shipping costs for that shipment to COMC from PSA either. So I'm saving money on that. So when you calculate that in, I don't know how much to calculate in per card, when doing this calculation, but that brings another $1 per card or whatever off. So it actually, like, the submission fee for submitting it, when I calculate all that in, actually is saving me money than if I was to just go through PSA directly. And if this is a card that I was planning on selling on COMC anyway, like, it just takes all the hassle, all the headache. I don't have to fill out anything. And it also helps with the speed of the return, because if you send in your own submission of 20 cards, maybe in that submission of 20 cards, there's 5 of them that get through quicker. For whatever reason, that seems to happen. Some go through quicker and some go through slower. But if you send it through COMC, they just get it back whenever it's done. So I don't have to wait for all 20 of my cards to be finished and then I get all 20 of them back. One card finishes, I get it back. It's in my COMC account. I decide what I want to do with it. It's one by one they come in. Usually more like 3 at a time or something like that might come in. So that also is an advantage, because it means I think I'm getting my cards back a little bit quicker. On the disadvantage of this process, there are more hands. Anything that you do that has more hands handling your card is, there's additional risk. When you submit your cards to COMC, you're submitting it in the card saver, so they're never taking it out of the card saver. They're sending it directly to PSA like that. But you are submitting it to a warehouse. They're dealing with millions of cards. They have lots of hands that are handling things, and the mail is coming through, and I'm sure they're being as careful as they can be, but you have a lot of hands handling things. So that always presents a little bit more possible room for risk. Now, from everything I'm saying here, I'm not really speaking about what kinds of cards that I think just in general you should get graded, whether it's through COMC or through something else. I do think there's a little bit too much grading going on, and actually I feel like that's actually going to hurt the market of a lot of cards. You can already see PSA 9s oftentimes going for less money than raw, which, you can have your opinions on it, you can think it's crazy. It's just the way the market is currently. Actually, that's something I might want to make an entire video about in the future, flipping raw to graded. Though it can be very profitable, I think as there's more and more and more people doing that, you have to be additionally careful and thoughtful and making sure that you're doing it with the right kind of approach, because the more people that are doing that, the more the pop counts are going up. With even PSA 10 pop counts are going up. It's already happened with the point where the PSA 9 pop counts got so high that their value went down so low. Like, as the PSA 10 pop counts also are going to be soaring up. The Victor Wembanyama base rookie card has more graded cards than any other card in the history of cards, and that's been out for a really short amount of time. So that's just another sign that there's even more grading going on right now. And you don't know what that's going to do to the market in the long term. If PSA 10s currently hold a big premium, so if you're trying to sell something right now, and you can't really get higher than a PSA 10, so there's a certain safety with that. But as those numbers go higher and higher in grading, people begin to realize how common a lot of those cards really are. And as people become more and more aware of that, and the hobby is generally more and more educated, even the PSA 10s might not hold a premium. If it's a PSA 10 where there's 10,000 PSA 10s, then what's the value of that PSA 10 if there's 10,000 of them? It's okay, this is a nice version of the card. There's 10,000 nice versions of the card. Any of them are fine. The demand doesn't even necessarily go down. There could be a lot of demand, but the supply is just so high that it just makes the cost go down. So anyway, that's kind of another topic. That's more about whether you should grade, what kinds of cards you should grade, which I have my opinions on. But this one's more about the COMC service specifically. So I like it. At first I was overusing it. When I first started using it, I think I was trying to find good flipping opportunities, flip to grade. But when you can't see the card in person, that really was not a wise idea. So now the main way I'm using it is either I will grade cards that I haven't seen in person, if it's vintage, and I would be happy even if it got like a SGC2, and I have been doing vintage. I've been sending it to SGC just because it's a $16 fee. Again, because of the way it's calculating, really $1.60 of that is that 10% fee that normally would be taken out in the cash out if I was to turn that into cash. So then when I calculate it that way, it's really like $14.40 per card that's being submitted to SGC. So there's some lower end, or like $20 cards raw that I might buy and send off to SGC that I, even if it came back at SGC2, I would be able to make a little bit of profit on, or cards that I want to keep for myself. I've done that a couple of times as well. I don't have a large collection for myself of graded cards. I basically try to limit the amount of graded cards I have in my own PC to like 9. I just don't care that much about the grade. I like the card. So, 99% of my collection is raw. I just have kind of chosen, the way I've decided to do it is kind of I have like a display, which I haven't even filled it out right now. I'm just kind of deciding which 9 I want to have be my PC for my graded cards. They'll go on this little display that shows, 3 rows of 3 cards per row, and I'll just have that up, and as I get a different graded card that I like better than one of the ones in there, I'll just replace it. And I think as far as graded cards go, that'll be my entire PC, and then the rest of my PC will be in binders and top loaders and one touches if it's one I like particularly, or it's a little bit more valuable, and I'll have some displays. I've been setting a lot of this stuff up because I'm going to be organizing renovating my garage soon to be able to display some different things. So I've been thinking a little bit more about display of my personal collection and how to organize it in a way where I can access the cards that I want to be able to look at, and I can display some of the cards too. So I've been kind of thinking a lot more about my organization recently. Actually, it's one of the reasons I've uploaded less videos on my channel here, because as well as keeping up with trying to sell things on eBay pretty regularly, I've also been trying to organize my personal collection better. So it's just eaten into the amount of sports card time I have, which is fine. Don't have a full-time business out of this or anything. So anyway, kind of going off on some different tangents, but this is all just, I haven't had a video like this for a while of just kind of chatting about things too. So I thought it was kind of fun. Maybe in the future I will make a more focused video on this idea of what kind of cards you might want to consider if you are trying to make profit with sports cards. What kind of cards are maybe the ones that are going to be the most promising for being able to flip to grade, because I think there are a lot of people making money from this process. It's just that as the number of people who are trying to make money from that process increases, as PSA's changing some of their standards to be a little bit more strict, as the number of PSA 10s for a lot of cards go up, like you just have to be extra careful. It's not just a everything kind of game. There's a lot of cards that you could buy raw, you could send in, you could get a PSA 10, and you don't make any profit even on a PSA 10. So I think that'll happen with a lot of cards that are overpopulated in general. So you have to be a little careful with that. And of course, if it comes back a PSA 9, it's so common where the PSA 9 is worth quite a bit less than raw. That's why honestly, I don't own for myself in my PC any PSA 10s. Is that a true statement? I think that's a true statement. If I get a PSA 10 of any card, I sell it. And then if I want it for my PC, then I get it raw. If I want it to be one of the 9 cards that's in my PC that's going to be a graded card, then I'll just aim for a PSA 9 or less. I don't care. I think that the extreme draw to grading is a little crazy in my mind, but maybe I can make a different video about that. It's just my opinion. I know everybody has their own. So however you want to engage with the hobby, I'm not here to judge about that at all. So anyway, that was I hope you enjoyed this video. Just kind of chilling in my living room, talking cards, talking COMC. So I will see you in the next one. Peace.